What's up, Descendant? Bob here. Today I got a very special video for you guys. It's gonna be my build 1.0 for Sharon. The reason that I'm putting this video before finishing my build for Glay is because this build is a little bit more competed right now. And I was already working on this build, but people were releasing build videos for this specific Transcendent module while I was at work, so I decided to release my progress so far. And like I said, we have the damage resolved with the weapon that we're using. And with this weapon, we're able to output 9.4 million damage, which is insane if you ask me. So now let me show you the modules that I'm using for this build. For the weapon for this build, we're using the Piercing Light. I'm using the Piercing Light specifically because I think that for single shots, it's way stronger than the Afterglow Sword. And there's a debate going on whether the Piercing Light is better than the Afterglow Sword or vice versa. And I think that both of them are extremely good for different cases. The Piercing Light is exceptionally good for Sharon, in my opinion. The reason is because we're gonna be pairing it with her invisibility skill, and this skill has a cooldown. So regardless of if you're using the Piercing Light or the Afterglow Sword, you're gonna have to wait for the cooldown to end if you want to maximize the damage output that every single bullet is doing. And for Void Intercepts specifically, I think that maximizing your damage output per bullet is extremely important because we're gonna be spawning with 6 bullets for the Afterglow Sword, for the Piercing Light. So every single shot counts, so we gotta make every single shot count. So that's extremely important. Now for the modules for the Piercing Light, we're using Better Insight. It's gonna increase our critical hit rate by 33%. Rifling Reinforcement is gonna increase our firearm attack by 32%. Better Concentration, it's gonna increase our firearm critical hit damage by 37.2%. Action and Reaction, this is the best module in slot in my opinion for the purple modules. For the Slow Art, for example, this one is gonna give us 16% more firearm attack. And Action and Reaction in total, at its max level, is gonna give us 61% more firearm attack, at the cost of our recoil being increased by 20%. But for the Piercing Light, this is negligible because the way that I use it and the way that you should use it is you're gonna shoot and you're gonna roll. The reason is because you want to cancel the animation for the reload. Every single time that you shoot your Piercing Light is gonna do the reload. And by rolling, you're canceling the animation and you're also being mobile. So that's very important to get familiar with for any build for sniper rifles. For the next module, we have Concentration Priority. This one is going to increase our firearm critical hit damage by 33.9%, but it's going to decrease our reload time modifier by 30%. Strengthen First Shot. This one is going to give us firearm attack plus 200%. The reason that I'm using this module instead of weakened point expansion or weak point expansion, it's specifically for the Devourer. I already have a build for every other content. If I'm fighting any other boss except the Devourer, I'm going to be using weak point expansion. But specifically for the Devourer, I want to maximize my damage output so that I can kill this guy as fast as possible. And the reason is because this guy is kind of like the benchmark for us to measure how strong our builds are. So that's the only reason why I'm using Strengthen First Shot for this specific build. But for any other content, I would highly recommend that you use actually Weak Point Expansion. It's a more stable module, way better than Strengthen First Shot for any other content. For the next module, we have Weak Point Sight. It's going to increase our weak point damage by 35%. This module, we're going to be changing it depending on the boss's weakness. In the case of the Devourer, he's weak against electrical damage, so we're using this one. And for the final module, we're using Weak Point Detection, which is going to increase our weak point damage by 20% and our firearm attack by 1%. There's a very specific element where this build shines, and that's gonna be with poison. And the reason is because, as you guys can see, I have this module Sorry, I was trying to read. This module that has its affix for poison. So poison builds are gonna be exceptionally strong for the piercing light. And the reason for specifically poison is because this weapon comes already with the PE affix for this module slot. So that's why I just chose to keep that module the way it is. I can't do anything else. I would love to put more critical hit rate for this build, or more critical hit damage if possible, but it is what it is. For any other element except for Toxic, we're gonna have to leave this slot empty. What you could do also, but it's probably not the best idea, is to have 4 types of piercing lights for every single element if you want to min-max your damage. But I think that I don't plan on, for now at least, spending that much time just to farm 4 piercing lights for every single element. I feel like the idea is crazy to level them up to their max level and then changing their affixes to each element. Maybe at some point I'll do it, just to min-max the damage for the piercing light. But for now, we're just gonna stick with the single elemental enhancements. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the Descendant modules. I'm gonna read them first, and then at the very end, I'm gonna tell you what the idea of the build is, so that it makes sense why we have every single thing and what we're working on and what we have achieved so far. For the Transcendent module, we're using Overcharged Edge. This module modifies active camouflage to consume shields instead of mana points. Ambush damage increases by the amount of shields consumed. So this is gonna change the effect of our invisibility. Now it's gonna be called Overcharged Edge. And as you can see on the description, it's gonna increase our outgoing damage by 150%. And depending on how much shields we spend, we can increase an additional 50% more damage. So that's awesome. And maximum 200% more damage. The next module is Mid-Air Maneuvering. It's probably the best module in slot. We have it at max level, which gives us 10 more module capacity. And if we put an affinity on this module slot, it's gonna give us 15 more module capacity, which is awesome. For the next module, we're using increased shields. It's gonna increase our max shield capacity by 151.9%. Next module is Max HP. It's gonna increase our max HP by 218.5%. Nimble Fingers reduces our skill cooldown by 25.6%. MP Conversion also reduces our skill cooldown by 36.5%, but at the cost of reducing our max MP by 15%. Next one is Multi-Talented, and this one kind of looks overwhelming. Looks like a Bible, but we're only gonna be reading the very first line of this module, and it says that when using the Dimension skill active, skill cooldown minus 20.5% for 5 seconds. And this is gonna reduce our skill cooldown for our Overcharged Edge from 6.4 seconds all the way to 2.3 seconds. Which is gonna be very important for this specific build. And the last module is gonna be Conditional Recharge. When using skill, consumes 10% of max HP and recovers 7.1% of max shield. So now let's talk about what I'm trying to achieve with this build. With the shields, I'm trying to maximize the damage output of my Overcharged Edge. As you guys remember, I'm gonna get an additional damage depending on how much shields we lost by casting this skill, which is a maximum of 50% more damage. And we're gonna be able to achieve the maximum amount of damage with this single module. You don't need to spend more resources on more shield capacity. I found that shields are extremely weak in this game. They need an urgent buff. Like now, like by tomorrow, they're extremely weak in my opinion. Yes, they recharge, but shield capacity is like 10% compared to our max HP capacity. My max HP capacity is like 7,000 and my max shield capacity is like 600. And I'm using a single module for each, for my max HP and for my max shields. So shields are extremely underwhelming in this game. They extremely need a fix urgently, in my opinion. And like I said, we're trying to achieve as low cooldown as possible, and we're able to achieve it with Nimble Fingers, MP Conversion, and Multi-Talented. Like I said, it's gonna reduce the skill cooldown all the way to 2.3 seconds when we cast our invisibility. And conditional recharge, when using a skill, it's gonna consume our max HP and it's gonna recover our max shield. The reason that I'm doing this is because when I'm casting my Overcharged Edge to increase my damage, it's gonna cost me shields, right? So it cost me 50% of my shield, and this next cast is not gonna output as much damage as the previous one. The reason is because it's not using the maximum amount of shields to how do you say it, like to the shield to damage conversion. So the way to fix this that I found so far is with a less module. By casting one or spamming it, I'm recovering my shields, and now the next cast is gonna have the full strength. But it's extremely expensive because it's costing me a lot of my max HP. That's the reason why we wanna increase our HP even more. We're gonna achieve this with Steam Accelerant. It's gonna increase our max HP by 234%, but it's gonna reduce our max MP by 15%. But we're not using MP exclusively for the first skill, but it's not too expensive, so not too bad. This is what I found so far to increase the damage output for the Overcharged Edge. If you guys have a different alternative, let me know in the comment section. What I'm thinking is try to lower down my or increase my shield recovery with module affixes, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to achieve a decent shield recovery. And for now, this is literally the only option that I have. So if you guys have another option, let me know in the comment section below. I'm extremely interested. And yeah, so now let's talk about how this build works. And it's extremely easy, to be honest, depending on what module you chose. So if you chose Strengthen First Shot, before doing anything you gotta reload your weapon. We wait. Next thing we want to do is activate our Overcharged Edge, and then we shoot. That's gonna trigger the maximum amount of damage possible. If you're using weak point expansion, you can basically skip the first step. You don't have to be reloading. Weak point expansion every 10 seconds is gonna increase our weak point damage by 140%, which is extremely good as well. And the good thing about weak point expansion is that you don't have to be remembering about reloading your weapon, taking an extra 2 or 3 seconds to reload your weapon. The effect is just active as soon as your cooldown is done. So you're just gonna cast your Overcharged Edge, and you're gonna damage the enemy. As you guys saw, it's a million damage less, but at the profit of being a little bit more consistent. Less damage, but more consistent. It honestly depends on what you're trying to achieve. But personally, after testing and after using this weapon in boss fights, I'm leaning more towards weak point expansion for consistency, but exclusively for the Devourer, I recommend Strengthen First Shot. And that's gonna be all for this video, Descendants. If you have any recommendations as to what I can do to fix my shield problem instead of using conditional recharge, let me know in the comment section. I'm extremely interested. I need to find a different way instead of spending my HP to recover my shields to maximize my damage. This is an extremely expensive module that I want to replace as fast as possible. So if you guys have an alternative, let me know in the comment section. I'm still trying to find the best solution. But yeah, that's pretty much all for this video. If you found it interesting or entertaining, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Later.